The Metal Gear Solid franchise is nothing if not unusual. Metal Gear games are monumental achievements in their own rights, but on top of being one of gaming's most technically impressive franchises, the Metal Gear Solid franchise really carved out its own brand of storytelling by adding layers of quasi-supernatural elements, occasional tongue-in-cheek playfulness, and overall weirdness to the already expertly portrayed foundation of tactical espionage and political intrigue. Now, there's plenty of gaming franchises out there with excellent storytelling and conflicted double agents, conspiracies, and plot twists. There are also plenty of excellent games with brilliant sense of humor and personality, but no franchise out there has combined all of these concepts in a way that forms an experience even remotely similar to what you get out of Metal Gear Solid games. Every game feels like a Metal Gear game despite all of them having their own tone and feel. Following this pattern, we have Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, whose main hook is going to great lengths to bring the Metal Gear franchise into the open world genre, which worked out better than most reviewers probably expected. But on top of that, Metal Gear Solid 5 brought us a curious story with an even more curious ending. Like most aspects of the franchise, there is a wealth of angles to speculate on and consider when digesting Metal Gear Solid: The Phantom Pain's highly unusual ending. And as a friendly reminder, from here on out, because of the interconnectivity and overlapping nature of these games, there will be spoilers for multiple Metal Gear games going forward, so you've been warned. After the events of Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker and Ground Zeroes, Paz was being held at Camp Omega in Cuba. Snake, who is from this point on taking on the name of Big Boss, needs Paz to help him track down the mysterious Major Zero, which goes well until a bomb implanted in Paz goes off, nearly killing Big Boss. After the main central story of MGS5 wraps up and Skullface, the main antagonist, is handily defeated and Mother Base is rebuilt, it's revealed that you aren't Big Boss at all. Well, sort of. During the explosion at the end of Ground Zeroes, the medic that shielded Big Boss and took the brunt of the blast did survive, but only after going through intensive reconstructive surgery to look like Big Boss, and was also administered psychological reconditioning so he himself actually believes he is, in fact, Big Boss. This person becomes the real Big Boss's phantom, and later on in the franchise becomes the antagonist of the original MSX and NES Metal Gear games from the 1980s, where you play as the younger Solid Snake, who later goes on in 1998's Metal Gear Solid to face Liquid Snake, who is the grown-up Eli from Metal Gear Solid 5, so you see how it's all connected. This ending drew lots of confusion from even longtime fans, including myself at first, and that's because it takes a while to digest. But also, even for Metal Gear games, this ending is particularly strange. Why have this body double twist ending? Why not just have Big Boss go through his journey to defeat Skullface and serve as a prelude to the beginning of the original games? A good spy story doesn't necessarily need so many layers per se, but if you thought Metal Gear Solid 5 was going to be simple, then you're in for a rude awakening. The many facets of Metal Gear Solid 5's tie-ups and loose ends all have their purposes. Firstly, as for the body double situation, it answers the question, why is Venom Snake apparently dead at the end of Metal Gear, yet also in the sequel Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake? The answer to that is now, after 30 years, pretty simple. Venom Snake, Big Boss's phantom, is the antagonist who is defeated in the original Metal Gear, while the actual Big Boss is who appears in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. I don't think a lot of people were really clamoring for narrative consistency in NES games from the 1980s, but even still, the explanation is appreciated and serves as a good twist for MGS5 on one level, and the worthy rationale of what happens to Big Boss going forward. On top of explaining the Big Boss versus Venom Snake situation, many characters from the games are explored further in 5 as origin stories tie into the ending. Eli serves as a great origin explanation of Liquid Snake, Psycho Mantis is also explored, Colonel Volgin is also explored briefly as the Man on Fire, and Zero's unresponsive vegetative state, which plays a role in Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 4, is also explained by being the result of the parasites released by Skullface in Metal Gear Solid 5. All of these questions being answered is a lot to take in and could honestly turn turn this video into a 5-part series really quick, but one of the most provocative angles of the body double situation is the potential philosophy behind it. Kojima is on record multiple times saying how he wants the player to feel like they are Big Boss and not just passively playing through his experience. Could this have been a clue as to what we were getting into with the mental conditioning that the medic in Ground Zeroes was going to go through to become Big Boss? Could that be an olive branch to the audience, guiding us to be open to the concept of mind over matter and the power of belief? After all, Metal Gear Solid games do usually end with massive, broad commentaries on the trajectory of society and humanity as a whole. Metal Gear Solid 2's extensive exploration into the methods of creation, filtration, and preservation of historical information, and the pros and cons that go along with different ways of deciding what information even gets to become history, is another good example. Maybe what Metal Gear 5 is trying to tell us, in addition to a plethora of other things, is that belief is everything. All details aside, the ending of Metal Gear Solid 5 did do about as good a job as any ending could have done to make sense out of the other canon games in the franchise, while also ending a single game that stands on its own 2 feet among the others. While the ending might not have completely tied up every single loose end, it did tie up a lot of them that I wasn't even expecting to get explanations for, let alone fascinating ones. And Metal Gear Solid 5 makes the overall story of the franchise feel like a complete circle instead of the fractured line that we had leading up to Phantom Pain, which is perhaps exactly what the franchise needed at the point of the release of this game. Metal Gear Solid 4 tied up Solid Snake's lineage, much like Metal Gear Solid 5 tied up Big Boss's, and even though it will probably always be looked back on as one of gaming's weirdest endings, it is also completely unparalleled in every way by everything we've ever seen and anything we're likely to see.
And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.